are so many people out there who want to volunteer and find a way in which they can help.
We've got some brilliant people that have come out of the school system here in Attleboro.
You actually perform as an elected official the way people should.
There are no agendas. Nobody has any projects that they have to complete, but we're just sharing information.
Welcome to People It's Good to Know. I'm your host, John Davis, and today we have an extra special guest with us. We have Attleboro's Economic Development Director, Chris McDermott. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, John. I appreciate being here.
I think this is a great opportunity for people to get to meet and learn a little bit about an individual who's going to play a huge role in the future economic development of our community. Absolutely. And I'm sure everyone out there would be curious a little bit about your background and how you ended up getting here in Attleboro.
Absolutely. Well, economic development is a field I've been in for about 9 to 10 years now. So it's someplace where I really took a deep interest in early on and chose to build my career in. Earned my bachelor's degree over at Assumption College, back when it was still a college, and went from there to University of Massachusetts Lowell, where I earned a master's degree in the regional economic and social development of regions. So. That's sort of a little bit about my education. Shortly after that, I went on to start my career with the then town of Framingham with their Community and Economic Development Division, just as an administrative assistant, really, getting in on the ground level, learning a lot about the field, and taking on some of the projects they had going on there at the time.
Which is a fairly, it's a town, it's a fairly large community with a number of people you could learn from, right? And
absolutely.
That was a good training ground.
They used to say Framingham was the largest town in the country because it had has a population of 70,000. They've since transitioned over to a city form of government. But at that point in time, we were focused on a number of key projects. They just launched a social media promotional campaign called Choose Framingham, so I was tasked with helping to manage and direct that. They had a number of brownfields grants, and for those who might not be familiar, brownfields are previously contaminated sites that might need some cleanup. We're a state that has a long industrial history, so anything that can be built on usually has been at some point, so you need to do a little remediation. So we had some funding for that type of program. I was also involved with their Community Development Office, which was involved with their federal grants, particularly the Community Development Block Grant and the Home Grant, which are housing-related programs. So it was a great opportunity to really, start out, learn how a municipal office works. I was also in charge of a lot of the budgeting, learn how some of these state and federal programs work, how local governments interact with their state and federal counterparts, and really gain that insight into the field. Shortly after, I moved up to North Central Massachusetts, where I worked for first their Chamber of Commerce as the public affairs manager. So in that role, obviously, I was serving as an advocate for the business community. We had something like, I believe it's 25, 26 communities that fell into our territory. So as a key point of contact for each of those municipal governments and all of our state legislators and our federal delegation as well. So really learning how things work on more of a political side of things, but also from a business advocacy point of view. So, really earned that piece over there before spending a year with their Regional Planning Commission, the Montchusett Regional Planning Commission, before most recently coming down this way towards the town of Mansfield. So, I saw an opportunity open up there with their first economic development director's role under former Mayor Dumas, of course. He's now the town manager there. And, it had a number of things that really attracted me to the community. They have a major industrial park over there, which was something that was very exciting to me. They were had launched a similar social media outreach campaign called Discover Mansfield, which I was tasked with directing. And opened up some opportunities to work more closely with fellow department heads when it came to permitting and helping clients and business leaders navigate that process. Making sure that they check the boxes and colored within the lines when it comes to making sure that a project moves forward correctly. So it was a very exciting opportunity. I learned a great deal there. Kevin's a great teacher, and I was coming on 3 years when I saw this position open up, and much as was the case with Mansfield, I saw some unique things that really attracted me to it. Attleboro has a redevelopment authority, which is very exciting. I get to work with a group of local, concerned individuals who really take their role on that board seriously, and
Right.
have the opportunity to drive change in a couple of key parcels across the city. We also have Gateway Cities funding. So for some of our viewers who might not be from this world, gateway cities are usually mid-sized cities that the state has recognized as key development points, and as the name implies, gateways to the Commonwealth. So they've directed some tailor-suited programming and funding towards these communities, ourselves included, to assist with our continued development and growth and planning. And on top of that, the opportunity to work with the city form of government. I've done so at something of a distance when I was working with the chamber, but I was never working directly in a city. So the opportunity to work with a city council and a mayoral form of government was something that was very exciting to me.
It's intriguing. I mean, you're a relatively young guy, and at this point, you've had a pretty diverse background in the whole economic development arena. And I find that really intriguing. That you've worked in a town, you've worked in a city, you've worked for the Chamber of Commerce. I think that experience can only really benefit us.
I consider myself very fortunate in that manner. I remember doing my my master's degree, and I was kind of building the plane as I was flying it. You don't know too many people in economic development, and it's a newer field. My father was a lineman, so there are definitely some conversations where where are we going with this? But I was really fortunate. I had some great guidance both from my professors and from my mentors, my parents as well. And was able to sort of, start charting a path, like I said, starting with Framingham, and really start mapping out exactly how this field works, how policies are developed, funding is allocated, and, those tools sort of trickle down to the communities who then use them as a toolbox, identify what works best, and manage to apply. That feedback goes back up the chain, and, the cycle continues with, ongoing refinement and development. So I've been really lucky in that regard, and as I've gone through this continuum of my career, I've managed to attract a number of mentors who are important to me as well. Working with the chamber with Roy Nascimento, who he actually started his career in Brockton, so some people watching us might be familiar with him.
I know I've met him along the way.
Yep, I'm certain you have. And he's well respected in the field. One of the great things about the chamber was learning how that industry works. The way that I know Jack Lank, I believe he has is certified as Institute of Organizational Management, or IOM. It's the U.S. Chamber's programming. I was submitted through that too. I was only able to do a year because of COVID. It's a 4-year program, and then I saw the opportunity with MRPC, and that's another angle of it, looking at how the regional planning commissions work and how they help to coordinate planning between the individual communities and provide some gap services.
I was a commissioner for SERPED, which is our regional planning, and I was intrigued. In the era when I did that in the 90s, there were a lot of very older, experienced people to learn from. For me, I felt it was like a really great experience just talking to all these people who had seen amazing changes over the last 50, 60 years. So again, just more experience that you've already gathered in your young life.
Absolutely. It's been a great opportunity, amazing ride, and I'm very happy to be here now, and working with my partners and across City Hall and the community at large to really advance Attleboro as well.
I mean, every job in every community is unique. I mean, I know when the mayor was talking about, posting for your position, we talked about, economic development can be a mighty big spectrum. And you really almost need to be looking for someone for a certain sliver of that. Because if you just hire someone and just leave them on their own, they'll end up focusing on usually whatever their strength is. And so we talked a lot about how we really need someone who has the skills to be able to help recruit and help promote Attleboro in the whole business world, because that seemed to be a sliver that we're missing. That self-promotion, it's a competitive world, and there are people out there just begging companies to come. How do we get ourselves in that line of communities where people want to at least consider going?
Absolutely, no, I agree with you completely. I think it's a critical aspect of this field. And there's a number of different ways you can do it. I mean, I think to start off, you start building your connections within the community. You learn about what major property owners are out there, who the realtors are, what parcels are available, what the square footage might be. You also start learning about the community's priorities. I probably spent a good couple of weeks just tearing through, a lot of the reports and planning and documentation that my predecessor had left as she was moving on to her current role. And I gotta say, she did an amazing job. She left a very strong foundation with some solid data and information behind it that I could work with. And again, it's sort of a toolkit that you can start pulling from and applying this, applying that. You're also picking up the ongoing projects and making sure that those continue on apace as well. But when it comes to the actual promotion, that's something that, as I mentioned before, I've been involved in on a number of different occasions, and even that falls into like a couple of different categories. On the one hand, you have things like Choose Mansfield or Discover Mansfield and Choose Framingham, where you're setting up the website, you're setting up the social media suite, you're putting out material on a regular basis that shows developers and entrepreneurs and even skilled employees who are looking for a place to live, that your community is the ideal place to, as they sometimes say, live, work, and play. Another aspect of that is the tourism market, which was a major factor when I was working in North Central Massachusetts. Attracting visitors, and it doesn't need to be international visitors. It doesn't even need to necessarily be out of state. The Commonwealth defines a tourist as anyone who travels, I believe 50 miles to reach their destination. As my former employer Roy would often say, you're looking to bring people with a little jingle in their pocket into your downtown.
Right. And leave it in your community.
Yes, exactly, spend it in the community. But when it comes to the larger employers, that's really where the relationship building comes in. You want to work with the developers, understand their projects, understand their challenges. When there is a challenge that, maybe it involves a couple of different departments and they're trying to figure out exactly who to turn to, how to arrange that, that's when someone like myself might have an opportunity to step in, work with the different department heads, sort of work as an intermediary and move them right along to the correct path. A great example of that when I was working in Mansfield, and it sort of tracked my time in the town as well. Probably about 1 or 2 months into my role, I got called into a conference room with myself, the assistant town manager at the time, Barry Lacasse, who many people here will also be familiar with.
Yeah, Barry's a lifelong friend of mine.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I called him before coming on board, and shout out to him and thanking him for all of the assistance he's provided. But we're sitting down next to a rep from Amazon. I expected to hear like, hey, we're scaling back, we're cutting a few jobs, and then instead it was unfortunately, we're coming out of COVID, the warehouse market's not working out the way we wanted,
we're leaving.
And the technology track in your building is not the one we're going with. Exactly, we're leaving. So a situation like that, obviously, take a beat, but instead of reacting with shock or oh no, you can't do this, because of course they can. You say, I understand. We're very sad to hear that. If we could sit down and talk. And one of the things that was fortunate there was they had a 10-year lease on the structure. So they were emptying it out, but they still had a 10-year lease. And we were able to build a relationship with them. I was working with them to see if we could put it on the market. Not surprisingly, no one wanted a sublease on 350,000 square feet of space.
Yeah, that doesn't go every day.
No, exactly. And eventually what happened was, while they shuttered this location because the technology didn't work out, the technology they were in the successful plants were still located in the surrounding facilities around the town. And eventually, they needed a place to store the robotics components that would be utilized in those neighboring facilities. So when that happened, I still maintained a good relationship with them. I was still at the top of their Rolodex. They were able to reach out to us, and they said, hey, we'd really like to, make sure there's a smooth process here. There's going to be some permitting involved. Wonderful, absolutely. Worked with them to organize a tour of the robotics facility out by Worcester with a number of my counterparts over in Mansfield. The fire department brought in some state counterparts because they had some concerns regarding battery cells that they wanted to take a look at. And we were able to move that project forward, and having that type of a relationship where they could sit down, ahead of pulling permits, ahead of filing permits, and really start just like spitballing ideas and getting immediate gut reactions. is something that really helps. So building that type of rapport, and there were a couple of projects where that happened. There was, Chocolate Factory was another project where we worked very closely with the developers, and when they ran into some issues, we were able to work directly with them and my fellow department heads to identify the solution and keep the project moving forward. And then, come back, there were some issues towards the end, some fees that were still outstanding. We were able to make sure that those got squared away properly before their final certificate of occupancy was filed. And, another successful project, a beautiful building in Mansfield that's been historically relevant building in Mansfield that's been preserved and put to a wonderful use. So that's really how I view my role as an economic development director when it comes to attracting and, promoting development, is building those relationships, making sure that Attleboro has a reputation as a place where, you're going to come in, we're going to talk to you. I'm going to introduce you to the planner, Gary, who's a critical partner of mine, the building inspector, and all the other partners across the across City Hall. And if there are challenges, if there are issues, we're going to work to make sure that you know that upfront as quickly as possible, so they can be addressed. Or if you need to change tack, you can. And once we have the permits in place, the project continues to move smoothly.
I mean, I think those are very valuable skills, to be able to work collaboratively with a variety of people and understand how all the pieces work together.
Yep.
Some people are really highly tuned in one area, but they can't work collaboratively and really make a project work.
Yeah.
And I think that that's great. I mean, I think we had talked before. A friend of mine, Angus McQuilkin, used to be. He played some role in the biotech industry, finding locations for people from all around the country who were looking to relocate their biotech firms, be it research or distribution. And I asked, well, why? You're showing sites all over Massachusetts to people. Why have you guys never been to Attleboro? And he basically said, because it isn't like you guys have the welcome mat out there with the door open. There are places around. It's a competitive, and there are places around that are begging people to come there.
Absolutely.
And we haven't exactly. To be truthful, I mean, I've been involved in business now 40 years. We have not really had the welcome mat out for people in the 40 years I've been involved. And I think that's changing. I get the sense that under the present administration, Mayor DeSimone realizes that. The future of the community hinges a lot on our economic development.
Absolutely, and I think a critical part of that, and one of the things that really excites me about working with the Redevelopment Authority in particular, is, a critical part of that is not just having the outreach that reaches out to the executives and lets them know, like, hey, we're open for business, we'd really like to work with you. It helps when you have parcels ready, when you have identified exactly, where that business can locate, where there are opportunities. So, one of the key things I really look forward to doing with the Redevelopment Authority as they chart their next chapter. They're doing some great stuff right now. Obviously, they're closing out the process for the sale of the TOD property.
Right.
So that's going to RFP in the coming weeks. And they're also in the midst of a strategic planning process where they're really starting to look at their structure and what their format is and what their priorities are going to be once they close this chapter and move on to the next one. And I think a critical part of that is looking across the available properties that are located throughout the city and identifying those parcels that can possibly be collectivized, reorganized, purchased, and put back out with an RFP to attract somebody like that.
Right. We certainly have a variety of underutilized properties. Sometimes they're being used in some way, shape, or fashion, but not to the fullest degree. I saw that for a number of years. I was in the home remodeling business, and I would see a lot of these older homes in our community where they had really become degraded over the years. You get to be 100 years old and people are still living there, but the quality of life isn't what it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. We have that with a lot of our industrial buildings.
Absolutely.
They just, in order for someone to fully utilize it, they almost need to be completely rehabbed.
Yep.
And that's going to, I think, lead to a tremendous amount of, I want to call it building. Building sometimes has a negative connotation at the moment, but I view it like the rehabbing and repurposing of some of these properties. And I always think not just repurposing, but up-purposing.
Yes.
Getting more bang for your buck out of a property. And I think for you, there's great opportunities.
Absolutely, no, totally agreed. We sometimes call this infill development because you often are taking, something that might have been, a mill at one time. You're repurposing it either for a new industry or maybe transitioning it over to housing or identifying a new use for it. We recently had a ribbon cutting for a property of this nature. It's a new apartment block that just opened up in downtown Attleboro. I believe, if I remember correctly, it's 43 units. It's been marketed as the Jewel, and it's at 54 Union Street. It's a former jewelry manufacturer. That we had a great developer come in, Lee Properties. They've been amazing partners. Really transitioned this into some really grade A market rate housing, and even though market rate, this doesn't necessarily mean that it's luxury prices. We're still looking at rents that are in some cases for a studio or a one bedroom below $2,000, which.
In this day and age, is reasonably affordable. I mean, for an old timer like me, it's hard to think that way. But compared to living in Cambridge and paying $5,000 a month, really, $2,000 is a bargain in the big scope of things.
I was at a table once, and it's a marker of my age as well. But I remember I was at a table with a group of department heads, and somebody said, we all remember when rent was $500 a month, and I had to say. No, we all do not. So for individuals my age, it can be a struggle.
I used to rent half the building next door to here when I had a manufacturing plant back in the late 80s, and it was like a few thousand. I don't know exactly, a few thousand a month to rent a giant building. It's just amazing how times have changed.
It is. But this is a great development that's come forward. It's high quality stock. Again, it brings in some of those residents that have a little jingle in their pocket, and these developers, they're early movers. So sometimes in assisting with that, we were able to provide them some tax incentives through a housing development incentive program, sometimes referred to as HDIP.
It is hard to get people to be some of the first ones to buy in and risk their capital. Everyone wants to jump on once something is going incredibly successful. But to get those first initial people to get the ball rolling is difficult.
Exactly. So, that was a very successful project. Again, 43 units, and right across the street from another project that's moving forward right now, which is the Union Street Theater. Really look forward to seeing what's going to be happening there with their recent mass development grant and how they move forward with phase one of that project. I understand, they'll be getting that temporary stage set up and just getting that to the point where they can bring people in. But I think as that project moves in, you have the development right there, you have the theater, you have some space for some restaurants and bars. You already have Chubb's Barbecue there. There's a bar space on the left side if you're facing it as well. I really view spaces like that as a catalyst. And this is the type of foot traffic you want to attract to the downtown that, aside from just bringing in the developers, you're also bringing in, shopkeepers, you're bringing in artisans. You're bringing in people who are looking at opening up a storefront and doing something unique in the downtown, and they need that foot traffic in order to serve as their base.
And I think some of the apartments that we're both building from scratch and rehabbing bring a younger, more diverse community. People who went to college in Boston. They've got their first job. They're going to live here in Attleboro for a few years until they can go to New York or Chicago or whatever. But in the time that they're here, they can contribute tremendously to the community, both in their disposable income, but also their youth and technology skills and the things that they bring to the table that for a long time we didn't have as vibrant 20 and 30-something community as I think we're starting to develop now.
Absolutely, and as you develop that vibrancy, as you develop that, downtown feel and attract those young professionals, they're not all of them are necessarily going to be going on to New York or Chicago.
A
lot of them are going to looking to stay here. Exactly.
Well, we always talk about who is going to be the next guy like Balfour who starts a company here that really becomes a nationwide. There will be someone. There may be multiple, and you never know who it's going to be. But it's a numbers game. The more people with the skills and ambitions that come here, the more likely we are to hit one.
Exactly, and that's exactly what you're trying to attract. I mean, I know that the industrial business owners back in the day were brilliant at that. You hear about them, bringing up their labor, training it up, and when they recognize somebody that had a great idea that maybe they weren't able to capitalize on themselves because of bandwidth issues, they get them a little, investment and, probably a space somewhere to spin off that company independently. They still obviously got a piece of it, but it allowed it to develop into something. And that's really, whenever you look at someplace like an Attleboro, like, an industrial hub like Springfield was back in the, early 20th century, or Worcester. That's how these, cities all thrived and all, drove an economy for, well over a century. So,
and one of the things we've been struggling with now for the last 30 plus years, not being the jewelry capital of the world, what are we? What are we going to identify as, and how do we label and market ourselves?
Yep.
Historically, there were places like Brockton, where it's one of the largest shoe manufacturers in the world, and in Worcester, all the furniture companies that were there,
and Gardner,
what are we going to be? That's the big question.
Exactly, and I think it's one of the most interesting things. You find it in other communities too, but I really see it in Attleboro. You still have a number of major players who came out of that jewelry cluster and focus who continue to operate here, both smaller manufacturers, but a couple large-size conglomerates. Sensata comes immediately to mind.
Right.
EMS Technologies is another one, and what I find interesting about those is they start in jewelry, absolutely, but jewelry is based on a basic, ability of metalworking. If you can do jewelry, you can do just about anything with metals. And these companies have taken that and branched off into new areas. They're in chip manufacturing now. They're in different coating technologies. They're producing, copper wire, fiber optic, what have you. But they've been able to take those skills that their employees have and continue to transfer them. Exactly.
Yep. It is interesting. I mean, we notice, those of us who've been around a long time, notice what's not here anymore, but sometimes we gloss over what is still here. Because
Absolutely.
it may not, some of the most successable businesses in our community aren't the ones with the big giant lights outside them drawing attention, right? I mean, there's, it's like, someone was telling me at one point, like, LVD Creations, who makes all sorts of gold, chalices and stuff. They're in the North Attleboro plant. They're like one of the top companies in the world at creating these incredibly upscale gold products, but they don't go around necessarily telling everyone what it is they do.
Especially if you have a bunch of gold in the building.
Well, exactly. I mean, if you've got $50 million of gold in your building every day, you don't go around beating the drum. But there are a lot of very successful companies around here who have very technical, specialized stuff that they don't brag about.
No,
but they're very successful at manufacturing.
And that's one of the really interesting things about working with the manufacturers and skilled industrial uses. That was something that was really picked up when I was working in North Central as well. Like you said, a lot of these companies, they're not exactly beating their drum, and sometimes it's a challenge. One of my focuses when I was up in North Central was looking at the workforce shift as a lot of that skilled labor moved to retirement. There hasn't necessarily been an influx of students who are looking at these places and thinking like, oh my God, I want to go, work in the smelting plant, when I graduate high school. Never mind that welding, manufacturing, skilled trades, etc., have amazing career paths for them. And part of the reasons that I was talking to educators in their school system, one of the things they pointed out was like, hey, all the colleges, they have that glossy one pager, that glossy trifold. Military, they have all sorts of promotional material telling students, hey, come here, we'll train you up. Here's how. Here are the skills you can learn. The manufacturing sector has not been as effective at that type of outreach. So how we raise it's not just about attracting new employers, it's also about raising the profile of these employers amongst our student population and also, people who are young adults. I'll use my brother as an example. He has a bachelor's degree, and he'd been working in retail for a couple of years and was looking for his next turn. And he just went through a mass hire program for HVAC. And he's, I think, 2-3 weeks into his job now. He's loving it. But gives a clear structure and career path.
And he'll never be out of work the rest of his life.
Oh God, no! He'll probably be making more than I am in a week or two. But
sad but true. I mean,
but I think raising awareness around these opportunities is also a critical aspect of it, because that's part of what keeps these employers here. I mean, it's not easy to move a manufacturing plant, but We know it can be done.
Right.
So,
Well, Chris, we've run out of time. I've been going on and on and on, and the clock has expired. But I want to greatly thank you for being here today and sharing with the public a little bit about what you do.
Thank you.
And hopefully I'll have you back on again sometime soon.
I look
and
forward
thank
to
you
it.
all for tuning in to People It's Good to Know. There are so many people out there who want to volunteer and find a way in which they can help.
We've got some brilliant people that have come out of the school system here in Attleboro.
You actually perform as an elected official the way people should.
There are no agendas. Nobody has any projects that they have to complete, but we're just sharing information